Post-apocalyptic games are always a popular genre, and there are a lot of great ones coming out in the near future. We'll be covering a variety of different games, from first-person shooters to survival horror to RPGs. So if you're a fan of post-apocalyptic games, or if you're just looking for some new games to check out, then be sure to stick around. On number 10, we have The Last Stand, Aftermath. A new episode of The Last Stand series was released in 2021. A new roguelite action-adventure game called The Last Stand, Aftermath has just been released. Being anticipated to perish as soon as the game begins makes it an exciting game. The scenario casts players as an infected survivor in a world overrun by zombies. You are still left to explore the world, gather supplies, and fend off the dead. You will eventually perish, whether it is the virus or the afflicted. You may then pass on your benefits and enhancements to the subsequent survivor. You may continue doing this for as long as you desire, but remember that time is constantly running out. On number 9, we have Scarlet Nexus. In the anime-style game Scarlet Nexus, players are dropped into a different universe. Mutated animals have taken over the globe, causing widespread chaos and fear. Thankfully, mankind has come together to create the OSF, an elite tactical army that only battles these beasts. Members of this elite army may utilize their supernatural abilities to their advantage, which gives it a unique quality. Our protagonist has telekinesis, which gives her the ability to toss items at the target. The advantage of assembling a party made up of people who have certain talents is another. There is thus considerable latitude in how you engage the adversary in combat. Although it may not be a typical post-apocalyptic game, this may provide gamers a slightly different perspective on the genre. On number 8, we have Chernobylite. Despite not being a post-apocalyptic game, Chernobylite is a survival horror game that is nonetheless worth looking at. Players take on the role of a former worker at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in the game. Our protagonist resolves to return to the zone years after the horrific catastrophe in the hopes of learning what happened to their missing spouse. The radiative zone, on the other hand, is full of dangers, including military people, stalkers, and mutant animals. In essence, you have to scour the region for a hint, supplies, and materials for making new helpful equipment. The campaign only takes players a little over 10 hours to finish, making this a rather short game. Fortunately, the many endings provide some replay value. On number 7, we have Mad Max. Despite how often media sources promote this game, Mad Max is a bit of a hidden treasure. There are many things to appreciate about this game, and it has a large open world for players to explore while scavenging for supplies and fending against enemies. It's an excellent game that lets players engage enemies while driving across a vast desert wasteland. In the meanwhile, you'll notice that combat is very swift and full of vicious hits and rapid dodges when you're not battling inside of vehicles. On number 6, we have State of Decay 2. The most recent game in the series is State of Decay 2, however State of Decay 3 will soon be released, therefore it's important to mention. In this game, players are thrust into a zombie apocalypse where they must struggle to live. Players will need resources and civilians to gather in order to develop a town. Players will need to keep a cautious lookout for any aggressive opponents that could be lurking about as they travel across the open environment in search of items and encounter individuals in need. This game is also fun to play with others since it supports cooperative multiplayer gaming. Having said that, this is an open-world game with plenty of places to discover and gather resources while fending off attacks from the undead. On number 5, we have The Division 2. An MMO game called Tom Clancy's The Division focused on a unit that basically served as the country's final line of defense. The original game immersed players in the early stages of the apocalypse, when a plague swept across the globe and the government was forced to utilize the Division to maintain order. Although Tom Clancy's The Division 1 has a large following, it's worthwhile to consider the sequel. This is in a post-pandemic, post-apocalyptic type of world. What's left of the Division is dispatched back to Washington, D.C., to prevent an attempt by a new domestic terrorist group to overthrow the government. Similar to the last game, this one is an MMO where players may team up to complete the various tasks or even do it alone. In a similar vein, this game is still actively maintained and new material is soon to be released to keep players coming back. The Long Dark comes in at number 4 on our list. In the first-person survival video game known as The Long Dark, players take on the role of a pilot whose plane has gone down in the bleak and snowy Canadian wilderness in the midst of a geomagnetic storm. In this part of the game, players are tasked with following Dr. Astrid Greenwood and Will Mackenzie, who is not only our main character, but also a pilot. Even if the car hasn't been involved in an accident, the two individuals still need to exchange an essential item in order to stay alive. In the harsh winter tundra, players will need to keep a close check on their vital signs as they try to stay warm while also gathering wood, building fires, maintaining those flames, melting snow, and doing other everyday tasks such as purifying water. It would be negligent of us not to bring to your attention the potential dangers that you could face, such as voracious wolves. Next, we have Fallout 4, which comes in at number 3. If you're searching for some excellent post-apocalyptic games, you should try playing any of the Fallout video games. But if we're sticking to games that were released more recently, we have to give our choice to Fallout 4. In this particular iteration of the game, the participants are dropped into the world only moments before the nuclear bombs go off. After making it to the vault for protection with their spouse and newborn child, players are compelled to enter chambers that put the vault dwellers into a deep sleep until they are ready to once again emerge above ground. This process continues until the vault occupants are ready to return to the surface. However, when the players awaken early, they find that someone has broken into the room of their spouse, killed them, and kidnapped their newborn child. They also find that their child has been taken from them. Players are sent back to sleep against their will, and when they eventually come to, they find that their captors have already escaped, and that everyone else who was in the vault has perished as a result of the ordeal. After leaving the vault, the players will find themselves in a large wasteland that is composed entirely of the remains of previously existing structures. When trying to figure out what happened to your child, players will have to go out into the open world to find makeshift villages and non-playable characters who, in an ideal world, would be able to point them in the right direction. Along the way, players could run upon a variety of diverse groups who are in need of aid, as well as hostile tribes or mutant beasts. Days Gone is ranked in at number 2 on our list. Bend Studio, which is most known for the Siphon Filter series, which made its debut on the original PlayStation system, is responsible for the production of Days Gone. The studio has produced a game with a post-apocalyptic setting called Days Gone. In this game, players take on the role of Deacon Street John, who has wandered from place to place throughout his life. As a direct consequence of the zombie apocalypse that has befallen the world, humanity has fragmented into a number of distinct tribes and settlements. Instead of settling down in one location, Deacon and his best friend Boozer continue to circumnavigate the world on their motorcycles while offering assistance to various villages who are experiencing hardships in return for supplies or money to trade. Despite the passage of time, Deacon Street John can't shake the nagging feeling that his wife Sarah could still be alive today. Since the beginning of the apocalypse, which began to separate Deacon and his wife from one another, Deacon has been hunting for information to help him discover what became of his wife. The game Metro Exodus comes in at number 1. Players of the video game Metro Exodus get the opportunity to investigate a world that has been severely damaged by nuclear conflict. This nuclear radiation has mutated a number of creatures, making the environment a very dangerous place to live in a manner that is comparable to the Fallout series. Following the conclusion of Metro Last Light, players in this game take on the role of Artyom. In order to start a new life, Artyom intends to go to the east of the country, and the journey there will take a whole year. There will be a plethora of locations for players to investigate, and they will be treated to many thrilling experiences along the way. Although this is the most current installment in the Metro series, it is nevertheless recommended that players check out Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, which were released in 2010 and 2013 respectively. And with that, my fellow survivors, we come to an end. We've taken a look at the best 10 forthcoming post-apocalyptic games, all of which are poised to revolutionize the genre and immerse us in dystopian settings in ways that have never been possible before.